the MAGA base, the minute that Trump says we're in a war with Iran, they are going to overwhelmingly back him because they have already. Every single time.
Krystal Ball and Kyle Kulinski had Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks on their show to debate different ways on how to deal with right-wing voters and pundits, MAGA voters, MAGA commentators. We're going to look at a couple of clips of this. The whole video is 41 minutes long. It's actually a really interesting video considering what's happened with Iran now. This is from a little while ago. It's really interesting. It's worth watching the whole thing. Why don't we take a look at these clips of Cenk Uygur debating Krystal Ball and Kyle Kulinski. Everything gets a little heated. It's entertaining. Why don't we take a look?
Rogan hosted Zuckerberg and Andreessen to attack the CFPB.
Of course he did.
To gut and attack the CFPB.
Be a Bernie Sanders progressive overnight?
No,
but
you
insane? No, guys.
Are you insane? You were the one who apparently thought that. Cenk, if anything is going to be populist, hold on, Cenk. Let me finish a thought. If anything, if the populist right stands for anything, you would think it would be an anti-scam bureau that is wildly effective. But no, and actually stood up against debanking conservatives. But no, what did Rogan do, and what did they cheer for with Elon with the chainsaw? Completely gutting not only the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Trump gutting the National Labor Relations Board, but them defenestrating the ability of this government to enforce white-collar crime at all. Did MAGA care? No. They didn't. The only people that held them to account were left and liberals who organized against that and, yes, successfully made Elon so toxic that he ultimately crashed out of the administration. That's what happened.
So let me try explaining it this way and see if I can get through to you guys. So you keep telling me all the things that Trump did wrong. Of course he did. So I'm saying that it's a given that he's always going to do, for example, 90% of things massively wrong. And in the other 10% that he plans to do wrong, I'm saying we have a fighter's chance if we ally and we show hypocrisy or we get allies. It's a win-win either way, okay? So for example, in opposing the war, either they become our allies and somehow at some point we stop this war, or we show, oh, you guys never meant it. Now you're the pro-war party, which makes us much more likely to win over independents and win the next election. But as I say that, you keep framing it as if I agree with them 90%, and where I think that I'm going to flip them overnight on the 90% where we disagree. No, there's no chance of that. So you can stop asking that question. They're not going to move on cutting the budget, and they're not going to listen that, hey, you know what, you shouldn't cut the malaria treatment in Africa. You shouldn't cut the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau because every dollar we spend there, we get back $20, etc. But if you go with your maximalist approach, guys, and you say, all right, I'm fighting you in a maximum way, so that means I'm never going to agree with you. I'm going to insult you at every turn. I'm not going to listen to you. So when you come in and you go, hey, guys, let's ally against the war, or maybe did you think that Elon's and I said this in every right-wing talk show that I did, and I said it at the Charlie Kirk event, I said, remember, beware of your own donors like Elon Musk. And then eventually they got aware of their own donors. Now, did they do it magically and overnight? No, it was mainly a fight between Elon and Trump, right?
It was their egos. It had nothing to do with Charlie Kirk.
And the reason they are unpopular is not because the left's maximalist approach of yelling fascist at every Trump voter is working. It's because their policies are deeply unpopular.
And who explains that their policies are deeply unpopular? The left and liberals are the ones that highlight how deeply unpopular those policies are. So that's where the credit belongs.
Like I do. So
right, but that's not like Joe Rogan does, right? Joe Rogan doesn't do that. Charlie Kirk doesn't do that. They don't do that. I just said
how unpopular they are.
Yeah, but my point is, Joe Rogan and Charlie Kirk don't do that, Cenk. They're not allies. Joe Rogan and Charlie Kirk don't do that. Steve Bannon doesn't do that. Sloppy Steve goes and gives Trump a hand job every day. That's the point, is that they're not allies. And by the way, even on the Iran war thing, they're lying. They are lying. We literally have the quotes right here. Charlie Kirk is already backpedaling. Quote, we must trust Trump in this situation. Steve Bannon, if Trump ultimately decides to bomb Iran's nuclear sites, MAGA would come around. That's not me speaking, that's Steve Bannon. The vast majority of the MAGA movement will go, look, we trust your judgment. We don't like it. In fact, we may hate it, but we'll get on board. Tucker Carlson called Trump and apologized, and he also said on his podcast with Steve Bannon, quote, I like Israel. I don't talk about Gaza because my audience got mad at me. He said, quote, watching Donald Trump, who at his core is sincere about peace, I feel for President Trump, and he just has to roll with it. That is not true. What he's saying is not true. These are not allies. They will immediately start moving the goalposts as soon as Trump starts bombing Iran.
Here we go again.
You're going to get this. You're going to get, oh, he's getting bad advice from the neocons around him. It's not a big deal. It's a limited attack. It's defensive. It's not offensive. This isn't like Iraq. There are no boots on the ground. The only people who are sincere that I will grant you, Cenk, is libertarians. So Thomas Massey and Dave Smith, because libertarians have a track record, like Ron Paul did, of being very principled. But everybody in MAGA, or 99% of them, will bend the knee. Just like 99% of the ones in Congress have already bent the knee. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's saying things that are against the war, she's ultimately not signing on to the bill to block the war.
Just before we hear Cenk Uygur respond, let's touch on what Krystal Ball and Kyle Kulinski are saying here. I think it's interesting in retrospect. Charlie Kirk, for example, about these right-wingers being an all-in once the bombing starts, because some of this right-wing MAGA, some part of them are genuinely anti-war. I mean, they're so isolationist that they don't want anything to do with any other countries, but that's going to put them at odds with the administration. And, you know, I think they rushed to the ceasefire. It's interesting how the Trump administration has handled doing Israel's bidding in this regard and how MAGA has dealt with it. I think ultimately what we're seeing is whatever boss says. Right? We're seeing this from almost all the right-wing commentators, with the exception of a few outlying voices that aren't attached with any major money. But, you know, there wasn't an American plane shot down. It was just the bombs, and then an immediate, I'm putting air quotes over the ceasefire because we'll see what happens. But it's interesting for me to go back and look at these earlier clips of like predicting the future after some things have already happened, because I think this could still unfold. I don't think you can do what we did in Iran and not have there be ripples that continue to fold out. But, you know, it's interesting how Trump is trying to be both the anti-war guy and the hawk, right? I mean, he's getting torn by the isolationists on one side and the more conventional Republican hawks on the other. I think when we look at Cenk Uygur talking about which of these people are, air quotes, reachable, I'm not sure that these pundits are going to be reachable. By reachable, it presumes good faith. And I don't see good faith from anybody. Everybody's just trying to find what's going to be the most profitable line of, Tucker Carlson, come on. Tucker Carlson's not in it for anybody but Tucker Carlson. So I don't hold that up as like, well, he's switching. So he's not switching sides. And Cenk Uygur isn't naive. I don't think Cenk Uygur isn't stupid. I think he knows what he's talking about. He might be overly optimistic in this regard. I do think you're seeing some people who voted for Trump now starting to scratch their heads and be like, this isn't what we voted for. But whether or not that is enough to sort of change the mechanism of the right, I don't know.
Okay, so here we go again. So again, 90-10, guys. The framing of that question makes it sound like I think Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson have good intent, and my God, they're ready to rebel on everything against Donald Trump.
I said Iran.
No.
I said Iran.
And I just answer a question.
But I didn't say that. I said Iran.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay. So I think that obviously 90% of the influencers, the hosts, etc., are going to stick with Trump 100%, right? Well, I wouldn't even say 90%. I'd say 75% or so. Are they going to kiss his ass on everything? Well, of course they are. They're on the right, and their whole ecosystem is based on kissing politicians and leaders' asses. Now, let's be honest, not us and not you guys, but MSNBC and now a lot of online hosts on the left, their job is to kiss the Democratic ass, and they say, oh, yeah, Joe Biden was young and dynamic, etc. So, yes, we have the partisans, And they are, by definition, always going to stick with one side is great, the other side is the devil. Okay. So now when you get to the 25% of hosts, because now the reason I moved it from 10 to 25, because you're including Rogan, et cetera. So is Rogan the same as Steve Bannon? If you think he is, that's just totally wrong. Now, do they agree on a lot of things? Yes. Do they agree on everything? No. Does Steve Bannon right about most things? No, he's horribly, horribly wrong about most things. So will they, when Trump says heal, will they heal? In the beginning, yes, and that's exactly what you're saying. But the reason they're having to heal is because they started rebelling in the first place. And Trump got mad, and everybody else got mad. And even today, you just go on any website. So Bannon is saying, don't go to war. It's terrible. Is he then saying, oh, Donald Trump? Of course he is, because he's on that side. And did we see a lot of left-leaning hosts go, oh, well, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are corporate guys and they're bad, but we have to go with them anyway? Yes, we did. But look, you have to be honest about what's actually happening. So if you guys are saying, and I'm not trying to strawman you guys like you did, in my opinion, in the framing of every question. So I'm asking you, you're saying it's all fake, and you think that all these right-wing hosts are not actually anti-war, but they've been telling their audience now for months that the war is a terrible, let me ask the question, and that the war is a terrible, terrible, terrible idea, and how would that strategy work? So they get their audience totally against the war, then they capitulate to Trump.
Let me tell you how that strategy works.
How did that help them be pro-war?
Let me explain. Let me explain how that strategy works.
My answer to your question is yes, by the way. In 99% of cases, they are just lying, and they'll go and suck Trump off again.
So let me...
That's a real disagreement.
They're already backing off, and the war didn't even start yet. We didn't even bomb the nuclear sites yet. They're already backing off.
How this strategy works. Okay. They postured as anti-war because they thought it was a good electoral strategy. So now they have some track record laid of claiming that Trump is the pro-peace candidate, blah, blah, blah.
And why was it a good strategy? Because their voters are anti-war.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Okay, the polling is wildly at odds with you, Cenk, on that. We can come back to that in a second. But okay, so they this is the pro-peace ticket, whatever. And I think there were a lot of independents actually who were swayed by that anti-war message, which was completely at odds with reality and with Trump's first term. I think we all agree with that. Okay, so I think there were independent voters who were swayed by that. Charlie Kirk and others now, to maintain some credibility, they have to postulate, Trump is getting pulled into this and the neocons are tricking him and confusing him, etc.
It's never his fault.
But we already know how this plays out because it's already played out. Trump called Tucker kooky and said he needs to get a TV network, basically saying he's a has-been. Tucker called him to apologize. That was the message, not just to Tucker, but to everybody else. Time to bend the knee, time to get on board. And they did. They did. Yeah. So we don't have to guess. It's already happened. It's already played out. Right, they've already bent the knee.
Okay, so we're now actually approaching an actual disagreement rather than the one that was foisted upon me that I don't like. So, all right. So, guys, you think that all these guys and their voters are all liars and that they're not actually...
I don't know why you lump in the voters because
I'm talking about the voters.
Okay, well, let's talk about
the voters.
Talk about the voters then. Let me ask you a really simple question. Let me ask you a really simple question about the voters.
Yeah, well, you of course you like the Trump and the Republicans.
Which parts? That's not what I said.
Stop saying it.
Cenk, let me ask a really basic question.
37-1 vote. You said how many Republicans voted
one.
War powers? I said one, Tom Massey, and you kept going like, oh, did you know that they didn't? I said yeah. I said
yeah, because they're fake.
So
but
yes, they're voters.
Let me ask you this question.
Remember, Tom Massey was the one that was in favor of Congress doing the War Powers Act, right, along with the AOC, and he's absolutely getting dragged by Republican politicians.
Voters are not anti-war at all. So be clear.
So let me ask you this question. Let me ask you this question.
Are you saying they're actually liars?
Let me ask you this question. Which base, the Democratic Party base or the Republican Party base, which one do you think is more opposed right now to war with Iran? Which one?
The left. It's not even close.
It's not even close. Exactly. That's the point. And so if you are going to build a grassroots people-powered movement with bodies in the streets to oppose war, where do you need to go for those numbers? The left, because they're already there with you. And by the way, the MAGA base, the minute that Trump says we're in a war with Iran, they are going to overwhelmingly back him because they have every single time.
You have the numbers already.
So put up 8. This is element 8, I believe, for us. These are the poll numbers. Now, there are other polls out there, I grant you, but this is among Trump 2024 voters. You ask them, do you support or oppose the U.S. providing offensive weapons to help Israel strike Iranian military targets? What we're doing now, 79% support. Do you support or oppose the U.S. taking its own direct military action, if necessary, to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons? That's exactly the framing that Trump is using right now. Support 72%. They are more pro-war. So are there some who, don't want to get in another foreign entanglement? Sure. But overwhelmingly, are they going to back an Iran war? Are they already backing an Iran war because Trump says so? 100%.
Okay, so let's establish who we're talking about. So when you talk about Trump and the Republican politicians, 99% of them are liars. They're going to be pro-war. They're going to do all the terrible things that we're against, that we are all against, including me. Okay. Now, when you move to the media, I'm out on a limb, and I get it. If you grant them an inch, people will say, okay, that's it. You love them, and you're a Trump supporter, et cetera. But I'm doing it anyway because I'm being honest. I think 75% of them are unreachable, but 25% of them, at a minimum, actually will listen to you, have their own audience pushing them to be anti-war. They're not with us on all issues. They're not with us on most issues. But on war, I think that a significant chunk of them are with us. Okay, so when you go to Charlie Kirk's audience, for example, why is Charlie Kirk even dipping his toe into the waters of opposing Trump's policy on Iran and then quickly rushing back out? The quickly rushing back out is obvious. They're ass kissers, right? So the question is, why did he dip his toe in the first place? Because he did a poll of his own audience, and his audience said 90-10 do not help Israel go to war with Iran. 90-10. That's his audience, okay? So now you move to the last category, which are the voters themselves. That is where I am most hopeful that they actually are anti-war. Now, does that mean 100% of them are anti-war? No, not at all, okay? But I think a solid 50% of Trump voters, remember, a lot of them are independents, or a lot of them are in somewhere in the spectrum. At least 50% of them are actually anti-war. So what I'm seeing is all over social media, all over the right-wing shows, their own base in an uprising. Why do you think Charlie Kirk, Tucker, and Bannon are doing those things? They're almost all of them are saying on their own shows, well, you guys are pushing me to do this, and yeah, I hear you guys. We're supposed to be anti-war, right? Now, guys, since this is like the first 6 months, are they going to go run back to daddy? Of course they're going to run back to daddy, right? So what we're trying to do is not turn all of them against all of Trump's policies instantly, because that is wildly unrealistic. You are trying to either flip them or show hypocrisy to the voters that you can reach on the issues where they agree with us. There aren't that many, but war is one of them with half of his base. So you guys think that if the left wing does a maximalist approach and we yell at those people, that those voters are going to interpret it as, oh my God, they were right. Since they're yelling at me, I will now go to their side. My strategy is go on those shows to talk to their audience and say, look, I'm not trying to trick you. I think you guys actually, a lot of you are actually anti-war. And I'm anti-war. And guys, you'd be surprised that they don't think the left is anti-war at all. They would have the same exact conversation in reverse. They would ask incredulously, who do you think is more anti-war, left or right? And they would all say right, and that the left is more pro-war. And I'm like, no, guys, no, we're totally anti-war. So Dave Smith and I did a coalition. Dave Smith did a great job on your show. Breaking Point's fantastic. I agree with you. Libertarians are the first to peel off. And great, look, we peeled off the libertarians on the issue of war. Perfect. And we're doing a website, unitedagainstwar.com, where I'm inviting allies. And if it turns out only the libertarians come and the right wing does not come, okay, then that's what happened. So now, if you're saying that no revolt happened at all, it was all fake, all the media guys were fake, 100% of them, and all the voters were fake, 100% of them, and they all actually love war, Okay, that's a straw man. I don't think you're saying that. But you got to tell me what you are saying. Are you saying that none of their voters are anti-war, or a big chunk or a small chunk, and that if we yell at them, they'll become more anti-war? Or if we reach out and say, hey, let's form an anti-war alliance, they'll be more anti-war?
So I'll tell you what I'm saying. I think that once Trump starts bombing Iran, those numbers we just showed you are correct. So like 70 to 80% of the Republican base will be in favor of it.
You know, I just disagree with Cenk Uygur on this. I don't think you're going to reach MAGA. I think they're listening to their own media and inside their own silo and their own bubble, and they're repeating talking points. And I think independents, I think there are people that still don't align with either party that we can sway. I think you have to keep the conversation going. You have to present compelling options and arguments, but in terms of the MAGA diehards, I don't think you're going to change any minds. And I think that was part of the problem with the Kamala Harris campaign, and even Hillary Clinton's campaign. You're trying to reach these suburban Republicans who you're going to change a mind. I think with MAGA, it's just not going to happen, right? And in terms of voices on the right being anti-war, I think one thing that Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kulinski and Krystal Ball don't mention here is they were only anti-war, or are only anti-war in terms of the war in Ukraine. They're not against war in general. The military-industrial complex, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's just too much money to be made. They're against sending all the money to Ukraine. They're not against war if Israel's involved. Doesn't seem. But, don't accuse me of being anti-Semitic, please. Let me know what you think in the comments.